What is the Schomburg Center? To me, it is home. The place where we come to see who we really are, not just somebody else's reflection of who we are.
The Schomburg Center is a place of culture. It's a place of history. It's a place of knowledge.
The Schomburg Center, to me, is a repository of all of the things that has documented our sense of worth as a people.
For me, that means that it is a place of immense power.
The Schomburg Center is a public research library and a cultural institution
for the study of the Pan-African world.
It is perhaps the best in the world.
My Schomburg Center is Arturo Alfonso Schomburg.
Arturo Schomburg said, Black history and culture and intellect exists at a time when most people didn't believe that. He collected those evidences, and that became the beginning of the collection.
And it has expanded and has grown to where it is now a world-class institution.
It holds over 10 million items.
There's no parallel anywhere that brings to light what we as people of color have done, what we continue to do.
Black culture is all of culture. The universals that animate everyone's life happen here for all people.
The Schomburg, for me, is one of the center pillars of Harlem. When I started the journey of finding out about Red Rooster and Harlem, the very first place I went to was the Schomburg.
Researchers from around the world come and use what we have here.
I could not have written just about any of the books that I've written without the Schomburg Center's archives, resources.
The Schomburg Center is much more than a library. We encourage lifelong learning and exploration.
The Junior Scholars Program is a Saturday program with students from 5th grade to senior year in high school to help them learn about Black history and culture.
Learning about my history is important because it teaches me who I am.
The Schomburg Junior Scholars Program is going to do nothing but uplift them.
So many talented and brilliant people have walked the corridors of this amazing institution over the years. From Octavia Butler to Toni Morrison and James Baldwin, Ella Fitzgerald, Alvin Ailey, and Harry Belafonte, who graced the stage in this room of the American Negro Theater.
This place evokes great memories. It was a gift to us in our community to really try to find that space to reflect expressions of Black experience. I just knew that the environment and what I saw these young African Americans doing was a place I needed to be.
What is my Schomburg Center? I'm standing here at the Cosmogram, which underneath holds the ashes of the poet Langston Hughes. On the evening when this Cosmogram was dedicated, people began to empty out of the auditorium a jazz trio struck up, and to my amazement, Amira Baraka went over and asked Maya Angelou for a dance. And they started to dance on top of the cosmogram, on top of the ashes of Langston Hughes, and I felt what a fitting way to kiss the memory of Langston.
The Schomburg Center is a research institute and a library, but it's so much more than that.
There's something going on every day.
So many amazing people come here to talk about their creative craft, to share what inspires them. The Schomburg Center's collections help to tell stories even beyond our walls.
The Schomburg Center is here in this exhibition at MoMA, One-Way Ticket, Jacob Lawrence's Migration Series. We depend on the resources of the Schomburg to enable us to tell this story. Thinking about the implications of the past on the present is absolutely crucial for understanding the next steps, understanding what we have to do to go forward.
We today have the responsibility of making sure that new artists and activists, new scholars and poets know that this place continues to be a resource and a source of inspiration for the work that we must continue to do.
The Schomburg Center is knowledge.
The Schomburg Center, to me, is education.
The Schomburg Center is home, it is family, it is foundational.
The Schomburg Center is inspiration.
The Schomburg is with me in everything that I do.
Community, inside and out.
The Schomburg Center is us.
The Schomburg Center is you, and we invite each and every one of you to find your Schomburg Center.
Good evening, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. My name is Novella Ford. I'm the Associate Director of Public Programs and Exhibitions at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, located in Harlem, New York. Through conversations, performances, film screenings, exhibitions, and more, we explore historical and contemporary narratives that continue to shape our nation and the world. I invite you to learn more about the Schomburg Center and our upcoming programs by visiting our website at schomburg.org. This week is our first Thursday Conversations in Black Freedom Studies, and going on all week long, starting tomorrow, is the Lapidus Center for Historical Analysis of Transatlantic Slavery at the Schomburg Center, holding its virtual conference, Pandemic Legacies, Health, Healing, and Medicine in the Age of Slavery and Beyond. We have two incredible exhibitions that opened in 2020 before the pandemic that are still available in person. One is Traveling While Black, A Century of Pleasure and Pain and Pilgrimage, which examines a history of travel from those who found themselves exiled within their own country to the pilgrims and pleasure seekers of our time. The second exhibition is Subversion and the Art of Slavery Abolition, which highlights several of the ways that abolitionists engaged with the arts to agitate for enslaved people's liberty in the 18th and 19th centuries. Thank you for joining us for tonight's Between the Lines series in this virtual format. Tonight, we will feature 13 authors from across Africa reading work newly published in the latest edition of New Generation African Poets, a chapbook box set, Nane. It's been co-edited by Kwame Dawes and Chris Abani, who we will hear from a little bit later. This is a project of the African Poetry Book Fund that helps give visibility to work that otherwise may have gone unread and unheard. Kwame Dawes' debut novel, She's Gone, was the winner of the Hurston Wright Legacy Award. He is the author of 21 books of poetry and numerous other books of fiction, criticism, and essays. Chris Abani is a Nigerian-born award-winning poet and novelist, currently teaches at Northwestern University in Chicago. He is the recipient of a PEN USA Freedom to Write Award, among many others. I am so pleased that we get to be in community with these artists, with these poets. In their introduction, Kwame and Chris describe defiantly distinctive voices, poets who are laying the groundwork for how we speak of Africa and African. They go on to write that the poets are opening up landscapes that are reconsidering the philosophical implications of modernity, of sexuality, of faith, of beauty, of landscape. The box set is available to order from the Schomburg Shop at schomburgshop.com at any time during this program or later. Now, please welcome Kwame Dawes, who will help take you through the rest of our evening.
Good evening, folks. Thank you all, wherever you are around the world and here in the US. So I'm Kwame Dawes. With Chris Abani, we've been editing this really remarkable series. Remarkable because of its how it came about. Remarkable because of the ambition of it, and also remarkable because I think what we've seen happen is a significant articulation of the ways in which careful work, a certain kind of dogged persistence can speak into a historical moment and create something that we could call legacy. We, therefore, that is Chris and I, are essentially making space for the voices, the articulation of creative work, especially poetry, at a time when I think we were facing a very peculiar circumstance in which African poetry was known to exist, but really was not being accessed, was not being made available, and so on. It seems like a simple thing, but it was profoundly damaging to what I think was remarkable about what was going on in poetry. Some couple of days ago, I was looking through some old papers from the 1950s, letters that my father had written. Many of you may know that I was born in Ghana in West Africa. My mother is Ghanaian, my father was Jamaican, and he had moved to Ghana in the early 1950s to teach in Accra. Well, at the time he was teaching in Kumasi before he moved to Accra. And my father's letters are fascinating to me because they take me to a point at which we are seeing the emergence of a kind of modern African literature. It's in the 1950s. It is the time when writers like Achebe, Soyinka, Okodbitek, and a whole slew of writers are emerging, and it's the beginning of an articulation of an African aesthetic. In one of his letters to a friend of his who was living in England at the time, my father talks about being thrown into a kind of swirl of cultural thought, of philosophical thought, and of an understanding of self that was transformative to him, because at this time, poets, musicians, artists, painters were engaging with what we like to call the folk, but were actually contending with their sense of place as a kind of resistance against the overwhelming pressures of colonialism, the overwhelming pressures of a kind of Western way of thinking and approach. And one of the things that fascinated me about his excitement was his sense that they were on the cusp of something quite remarkable and quite important. There was also this understanding that art emerges at a time when it's needed. Art emerges and transforms people at a time when it's crucial. And there is a sense in which when you're born at the right time as an artist, the weight of your contribution, it becomes hugely important. So the African writer, and I use that generic term because it is a term that both has colonial implications, but also has a forceful anti-colonial articulation. The African writer is recognizing themselves as part of a deconstruction of a continent, an attempt to deconstruct that continent, to destroy that continent that Walter Rodney describes as the underdevelopment of Africa through colonialism. And then in an attempt to push against that and to transform that, there is a quest to return to a self and return to cultures, thinking, cities, sort of views of the world, engagements with the world, and to discover in that a power and a use that will then have an impact on the modern world. And I think in that moment, when we start seeing the publication of novels, when the Heinemann series emerges and a number of other series emerge, when the theater is alive with attempts to find a philosophical articulation, an aesthetic articulation of African experience. In that moment, we begin to see something transformative and something explosive, and yet something that draws people together. So I want to say that moment of thinking about these letters and this communication helped me to understand that one of the key elements of that emergence of a new African poetics and a new African literary experience was driven by technology. And the technology would have been the radio, the work of radio programs that aired this movement and this explosion, by film, the documentaries on drumming, on art, on music, on dance, and also by the publication of work. That is another technology, the idea of making books that could be disseminated to different parts of the world and to different people. And so it's interesting because then growing up in the 60s, one of the transformative moments for me was to discover the Heinemann Writers series. It wasn't the only African series by any stretch, but it really was a persistent one, and it had this peculiar attraction of a logo, and then of course a kind of physical branding. You could see the Heinemann series. You looked at it on a shelf and you saw all these books lined up, and you thought, here is a tradition being made. Here is the articulation of that tradition. And as that number kept growing, you felt as if you were witnessing the growth of a rich tradition and a rich experience. And in that sense, that was transformative for me, because I felt then as a writer that I had a responsibility when I started to think about writing, to write into that tradition and to add to that tradition. And it was fresh and new enough for me to feel as if I could be relevant in that tradition. So how does that merge with the emergence of the African Poetry Book Fund? The African Poetry Book Fund emerges because Heinemann ends its series in the 80s and early 90s. And soon we begin to realize, and the Heinemann series, just to be clear, did publish a tremendous amount of novels, some plays, and some poetry, but not a great deal. But what began to be clear was that there was no place where it was clear and simple, or even not just simple, but even clear and obvious of places for African poets to publish their work, to have their work published. And so we saw a peculiar sense that when you wanted to understand where African poetry was, versus as against the novel, when you wanted to understand where African poetry was, there was a sense in which, where do you find these books? You find them in a few anthologies, or you find them at festivals and other events like that, or you'll find them in localized, that is within different countries, bookstores and some smaller presses that were publishing their work, but not in the numbers that made you feel as if you could have access to it, especially if you were not within the continent. And even inside the continent, getting work from other countries was very difficult. And I do think that this was a disturbing situation, because it certainly was my view that talent, ability, and all of these things can be suppressed if access to the ability to publish, by that I mean to broadcast, to spread around, is curtailed, is limited. And this struck me as a significant problem. So the African Poetry Book Fund emerged as an attempt to publish work, to publish African poets and to see what would happen. This box set is number 8. And number 8 meaning that we published each year a box set containing chapbooks by poets who have never published a full-length volume of poetry at any stage, but who are emerging with their own work in interesting ways. And what we were trying to do is to see if we could find a way to publish this work and to begin a tradition that was not unlike that exciting sense of having those books line up in front of you and you see what happens. We had 2 options. One of the options was to say, okay, why don't we do an anthology? The problem, of course, with the anthology is that the anthology doesn't necessarily offer you a generous helping of the work by an artist. The other problem, of course, with the anthology is that it is a way in which we consume literature without understanding the full range of what a poetic articulation is in the form of a book. So a single poem here, 2 poems there, does not necessarily give you a fuller sense of where the artist is. And in the economy of publishing, an anthology does not give you a critical step towards publishing a full-length book and so on and so forth. It doesn't give the writer that critical step. So then we thought, why don't we do this box set of individual chapbooks? These individual chapbooks would be in this box set, and they would be marked by something really important, which is to have other writers of some stature and importance, write introductions for these chapbooks. And this was to treat each chapbook as an entity in itself, with its own ISBN and with its own while it's still part of the box set. One of the greatest relationships and collaborations that emerged was that with Akashic Books. And Akashic Books has been publishing our box set for the last 7. So from the first one was published by Slapper and Hall Press, and then we moved to Akashic, who's this wonderful press out of New York. And then the other thing that we decided to do was to make sure that the design looked exciting and looked dynamic. And we then thought of the idea of identifying a single artist to share with us the artwork for each of those covers that were contained in there, eventually creating a virtual gallery of their work that would be therefore transmitted all over the place. Now, one of the interesting parts of our discussion with Chris and I, Chris, in this introduction, Chris says something about the dialogue that these poets are having with each other. And I know Chris is here, so I wondered if Chris would start on that point and actually talk to us about that idea when you introduce this notion that we are seeing this phenomena taking place with our poets, that they're in conversation. What does that represent, Chris? I mean, could you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that would be a great way to get us thinking before we listen to the poets.
Sure, I can, and I'm sorry for being late. I, in my typical Nigerian way, thought 6 o'clock, I got this. And so I ran straight from class. So apologies to everyone, and apologies to the Nigerians for disgracing them like this. But nonetheless, so jumping right in there, I think we've been doing this for a while now, several years, and we had our own imagination, I think, about what this would look like when we started and who we thought the people would be. And part of it was also inspired by poets we met on the road on the continent when we were doing different poetry events, and we're thinking, why are these people not published? But so over the years, what we've started to realize, I think, is that what we're doing is a kind of a loose curation. So it's gone from having an ideology even, or an idea of who these poets are, to watching these poets evolving, both in terms of their craft, but their conversation amongst themselves. So it becomes clear when you look at some of the books and the dialogues that are happening, that these books are being read and circulated either in print or even maybe virtually, because the exigencies of getting hold of material in West Africa and other parts of Africa are problematic. But there is a distinct conversation beginning to happen. These conversations are very different from the generation before. And even there's a generation I like to think of as the lost generation. So the generations between Soyinka and the new generation, sort of people that in fiction, we're thinking of people like Isidore Bowe, we're thinking about other people like this. But these are very modern questions. They're beautifully framed questions. They're questions around gender that haven't happened before. The questions around sexuality that have been hinted at in the past but never fully explored. They're looking at other kinds of conversations too, startling conversations about the nature of nationhood and what that can even mean in a context where we've had things like the ECOWAS, and we're talking about an African Union, and also sort of the world of letters, and so almost like nation literature as nation. They're defining self in post the sort of like pressures of generations before. So it's not so much the same kind of politics of the state or any of those things, although those are always lurking in an African context. But they're really sort of having this conversation about what does it mean to be human at this time, occupying these bodies in this larger context. Because I think one of the powerful things about this box set is that it's actually trying to be representative of Africa. Usually, whenever you go to African literature conferences, It's either sub-Saharan African literature or the sort of North Africa, Middle East. And so this seems to be more in the realm of the Pan-African that we have envisioned even ourselves kind of coming up with parents who are Pan-Africanists. So I think that's what's beginning to emerge, and it's really, it's actually humbling to be able to stand back and to realize how little you need to do to create space for these hungry intellects, for these hungry artistic personas to engage in this level of a dialogue that far exceeds their Western contemporaries. And even, well, not even their contemporaries, who can argue people in the West who assume they're above them. And so it's beautiful to be humbled in this way.
Yeah. Chris, what we're going to do is we're going to sort of jump into the listening to some of the poets do their work, but I thought it may be a good point to I'll just list a few names, and then I would want us to celebrate Admire's work, the artist, Kamudzen Jerere, who is the featured artist for this sequence. But I just want to name some names before we do that, which would be Benga Adioba, Safia El Hilo, Patricia Jabba Wesley, Chekube Danladi, Honoré Fanon Jeffers, Chezwa Mfasa, Parnisha Jones, Natalie Handel, Shara McCullum, Samir Bashir, Safia Sinclair, Philippa Yadi Villiers. Some of those names you'd know. And these are all people who gave their time and volunteered to read these beautiful collections and write introductions for each of these chapbooks. And to us, that is part of the community that Chris is talking about, the conversation that is happening. That is fantastic. And as I mentioned earlier, we use a single artist. And I think, Chris, you came up, you introduced us to Admire's work. And I think we want to just do a little quick feature on him before we start listening to the poets do their work. So.
Okay. Well, so yeah, I think, do we have something prepared, or are we doing?
Well, they've done a nice slide that shows some of the work and some of the art. So that is there. And then what I will do is I will introduce the first set of readers, and then you'll come on next and introduce the next set of readers. And I will start by actually saying that what we're going to do is have a cluster of poets reading. And I won't do too much a lengthy introduction of each poet, but just to tell you that the poets for this first part one, this sequence, the names are Ayan M, Omar, Edil, Hassan, Sara, Elkamel, and Hawa Shafil Nuhu. These are the poets that we'll be exploring and that we'll be listening to. And of course, we'll see some slides just before they begin their work.
And just to add just to sort of talk about part of the reasoning behind choosing the artist. So over time, I've also been interested in how conversations are occurring with the artwork between the artists, not necessarily because of us, but sort of in the way they're being curated. And so there's an Ethiopian artist, Julie Mahertu, whose work is phenomenal and stunning, and uses the idea of grid work and lines, and just the idea, very much almost Derridian in context, the idea that humans are fond of making marks, which kind of throws us back to it's almost rock art and the original art in the mind, but how, in a way, the artist we've chosen, his work speaks in the same way back to Julie's idea. But so it's like, if you look at the lines, it's almost like what we might think of as cartographic vision quests, right? These lines that we're leading through and how they produce imagery. And so it's almost like the human form that emerges is sort of like, which we think of Shoyinka's essay on Ogun, that moment in which consciousness emerges on the African continent out of the chthonic chaos. And reminds me when we were in Zimbabwe, Kwame, and we saw the rock with the painting, and there was a human hand, and because it hadn't been so sheltered, we were able to put a handprint on this human hand that was 5,000 years old. And so I thought of it largely as sort of a link between people, ancestry, the politics, and sort of inscription and erasure. So I think the work is profound in itself and starts to tie back to Victor's work and some of the other artists we've used all the way through, which is always about, and I think is what the poets are doing, the rendering of self through all these different mediums.
That's great. I love that. Let's hear some poems.
Good evening. My name is Ayan. I'm going to be reading you a poem that I wrote. It's entitled Koroska, English translation, The Elixir. I don't know what love means here. To give your body to people who rim all the salt water from your system, reopening the same wound 6 times just to see the blood. He makes you forget that you're alive, you say, and you just need the reminder. I don't know what love means there. To give your body to a stranger from photographs, fathers that make vows for a future that won't include them, where a lifetime is spent living beside a ghost. He walks the halls like he hasn't seen the sun in a century, you say, and none of your songs will remind him. At this point, you've seen so many ghosts. I've lost everything in translation either way. The love songs in Somali are beautiful, but I don't know what they mean. All I understand is the war coming close when Saradha calling out to her love, the elixir, the drug that keeps her from falling asleep, the way more cousins come crossing the border each day, a small death in every displacement where the hungry and drained drag their feet to the refugee camps. All our parents could carry were the photos and the trauma, the furniture, the sea, the toucan with the best mangoes, the neighbors and the neighborhood, the nesting birds. They were all left with the bodies. But that was Hamar by the ocean, and Ayeyo's never seen the ocean before. In Chichiga, the Cubans took my mother's home and planted a great tree, and Ayeyo cut it down because of evil eye. These days, the only beautiful part of our small desert is the neighbor's roses, as pink as sunset, a colorful splash of diraros against the brown earth and sand and brick and cast. So if Atlanta is a shithole, and Hamar was a fever dream, burst open with bullets, then Chichiga has to be home, right? There, love was the glass of milk a wool was shared with Ayeyo at each meal, halves of halves of halves, the 6 months of food sent to the prison, Fajr prayer, Iqama, waking up the kids, Shahmado and warm hands and 7 children with faces made beautiful from the both of you. There, love wasn't simple, but it didn't hurt. Whether it's me or my parents, we all carry too much and too tightly to really open anything, be it hands holding onto every awful memory or the heart. But here, love can't be half a glass of milk as much as maintenance, bills I can pay on my own, a bed made of sawdust, you light a match with your lies. We can't curate the kind of love that leaves you awake between the letters of a language, that calls you the N-word at Trader Joe's, and we can't sing the songs from home. In hookah lounges heavy with smoke, throats sore and full of sin, all of our love has been left illiterate and alone. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Edil Hassan. I will be reading from Dugsi Girl. Here. First, the opening. In Hargeisa, the schoolyard is full of girls, lined and straight like their plates. They open their mouths, their breath like sweetened milk, and the day begins. In the name of Allah, the most merciful. And out of verse, make a door to heaven. All praises due, ashy knees and Nivea blue dreams, laughter like tin roof coming down. And this is not mine again, this again, not mine, no summer flurry of daffodil and wishes, boots sully the earth of Callahan, no gold glinting obscenity in winter light, no cedar sap and pine wood and maple leaves veined and wide like a hand. And yet these girls are another holy text, and I make us into a mouth, and their mouths open like a window, receive, and inside a quiet absence, a dwelling for a miracle, your grace, a rapture, if only slender enough. Taking attendance, the school teacher walks down the rows only to stop at one girl in particular, whose mouth, unlike the rest, puckers red with lipstick, To humble this pretend woman, to make a house for her shame, he asks, what animal did you butcher with your teeth? My second and last poem, Fried Fish in Saleh. I joke that I'm boy crazy. I dance in downtown apartments, sour smoke parting to reveal the next man, to rest a hand against my back and imagine it, touching and touch already receding. And rather than admit to having gone a month without my fill of love, I fill the lapis of the morning and think of you. To think you could have left that time sailing down the Nile, fist full of lemon, fingers glamoring oil, you pulled the bass's spine like your mother taught you, tongued the last fleck of meat on that gleaming bone, and choked. Your life, you thought, to no longer meander like that river. Your life, I thought, to pay the final price for that gluttony that now I too have inherited, am indebted to, like how my room is indebted to twilight. Here, where that last note of a man and his call to prayer floats, moving through the dark, a floodlight of silk, one lover calling the other back to bed. And here in the city, I am unmoored by anything that sounds like leaving. Yet there it is again, behind my eyes, offering me the night's first dance, the shimmer of the blue hand. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us. I'm going to read two poems. This is the title poem of my chapbook, Field of No Justice. Though they will be reborn each morning with the sun, the dead remain obsessed with the image of a single rose by a crocodile's open mouth. A wail from the corner of the room usurps the room. Give me a mouth. I want to talk, said the dead woman to the scale. The heart on the scale is the heart of a sparrow. My heart is the heart of a sparrow. The sparrow was unremarkable. I cannot give you her name. When I fell, she switched my heart for hers. Mine was a clay heart the size of the sun. Ask the sun, just ask the sun. The sparrow's feather heart is not my heart. My heart knew nothing for certain, loved nothing for certain. My clay heart did not know its own name. My clay heart envied goslings their nests, envied mothers their sons, smothered every fire before its hour. My clay heart cursed the heart of my mother. I stayed a child to have a child. I kept everything secret. My clay heart licked the milk off the mouths of little children. I chewed the hair off my knuckles to make the hands usable. I tried to be a woman. My clay heart thawed one night. I saw it. I gave a boat to a boatless man and at the lips of water took it back. I wrapped the heart of my love in white cloth and buried it with the others. I made a remedy for remembering and drank one half in the morning and one half at night. I couldn't move. I gave myself running feet, even remember how I did it. I scraped sand off my toes and mixed it with pulverized red pepper. I spooned it into the river, even though they said this causes a person to run from place to place until she runs herself to death. I couldn't move. The prayers I whispered into the walls bounced back. I am not pure, I am not pure, I am not pure, I am not pure. They weighed the wrong heart and found it lighter than a feather. To the field of reeds, cried the 42 gods of the feather. But my heart, I said. Find the sparrow, said Osiris, stroking softly the crocodile. The sparrow soared freely above the cliffs and the light fell on all of us. Okay, and this is Buried at Sea. Thank you for listening. I stand on the balcony with you, our bones quick to draw dust. Gold chains circle your neck and dangle from your ears. Outside, the men carry Jika's casket and scream, the sky a pink funeral. For a second, we wonder how blood could spill itself over so many God-forsaken clouds. Inside, we stitch sorrow doll after sorrow doll and beat them against the floor. We make thousands like this, spray them with blood, then with water, and beg them to suffer. What a mess, I say, as we pick them up and do repairs. suture arms and heads and stuff synthetic fiber like scrap clouds into their backs. We saw the box, you say, but not the body. Not the white linen taut around it, not the matte dust rise as it hit the ground. We pretend he drowned and traveled north with the Nile. We doused the dolls in gold, load hundreds into our bags like fruit. We talk about our mothers and walk for days towards the sea. You teach me to swim, teach me so well I could have reached the very heart of the sea. We swim like we were born breathing water. Remember what we did in the womb. Swimming, there is no blood, no fire, no echo of power, no echo of blood, no dust, no box. We carry the golden bodies like gifts to the gods on the floor. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Hawa Shafi Inugu, and I'll be reading poems from my chapbook titled Sister. The first poem is titled Tonight. I assemble all the people in the small country of my chest. I wrap them to my bones and feel my body sag from the weight of loving in an empty room. I open my mouth and I'm my lover. I close my eyes and I'm my sister. Tonight, my heart swelters with my people. When I sigh, I hear a saxon move. I say, Lord, protect the people I love. Lord, let their songs remain songs forever. Second poem, the first rule of rescue. Daddy, I am little and a girl, sitting between his legs, in this hour the soft, beautiful of a departing sunset. My legs shivering like reeds caught in the wind. He says my name as though to keep me alive. With a spoon filled with syrup, he says it again, a prayer, a plea. I part my lips and the spoon goes in. Later, he dampens my burning forehead with water, and at night he holds me as though shielding me from something greater than himself. And it is my first lesson in vulnerability. He speaks scripture verses over me, his voice quivering under the unbearableness of love. He says, Wasi, recite Ayatul Kursi, recite it until you fall asleep. And then he returns to praying over me. Years later, when I try and fail to save my brother from himself, I will recognize that action, his head bent over me, whispering my life back into my hands, then looking up to continue whispering it into my body. I will recognize it as the first rule of rescue. Last poem, fault lines. Because I am trying to hold my brother's cracks together, to keep him from falling like a pebble into my shadow, I walk in a zigzag in front of him for too long. I forget to look back. Because I know no other darkness but mine, I protect him from no other darkness but mine. So when he falls into a hole, I do not see the pitch dark inside it as a thing that is his, a thing that belongs to him. My guilt is a room without air. Thank you for listening.
those poets a hand of applause. It was kind of really stunning. It's funny, you read the work when you're editing and compiling it, and then you hear it read back to you, and it's as startling as though it's the first time. And when I mean startling, I mean that in a really good way. We're gonna proceed with the next part of the reading, and we're here to see the poets and to hear the poets. Kwame and I are like, we're the old men. So I'm gonna sort of just rush straight into the introduction. And as always, I have to say, the presence of Nigerian poets. I'm not biased. I'm just saying I'm always proud because Nigeria know they bought last. So I'm going to start by introducing the new poets. So we'll have Cynthia from Ghana, whose work is really incredible. And I remember how moving it was, particularly for Kwame and I, when we first encountered it. We have Precious Arinze, my sister from Nigeria, also Igbo like me. We will have the work of Saradha Soobrayen, I hope I say that right, forgive me if I don't, who's from Mauritius, and who actually is one of our first from this part of the continent, and continues sort of open up this Pan-Africanist moment for us. And of course, my Egbo Midada Kolawole Samuel Adebayo from Nigeria. So I think we're set to go. And so please let's hear these amazing poets do their thing and continue to be in awe of the beauty that they make.
Good evening, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with you all. I'm going to be reading two pieces from my larger collection entitled Handrails. The first poem is entitled Jukwe. On the way to Kakum, there is a town named Jukwe, where the dirt is unusually red. As is all of Ghana, but on the way to Kakum in Jukwe, red dirt covers cars passing through, covers green trees red, cars whipping past the town to get to Kakum. The farmers rise, tend to the palm nut, the corn, the brazen cassava. Jukwe is a small fight. A secondary school sits atop a hill. A child bathes on the pathway to his home. West of the sun in Accra, you have to pass Jukwe to get to Kakum. You cannot avoid the red. If you look closely, you can see the reckoning. The rest points to bondage. I imagine when it all started, the Fante were the first to go. I imagine some ran and hid in the forest. They said it happened on a Wednesday. Men trying to sit in their skin while bursting out of it. It was a market day, the most important time in the town for madness and bleeding. Language forces confrontation, but it also allows for freedom. What does it mean? No one spoke that day. There were only screams. The trees are high in Kakum, near Jukwe. In between the castles, Tachim and Opafu Chrome are nearby, but they are not as red as Jukwe. The trees, they sway, lean forward, move back as if to say, welcome here. Egypt knows sand, and we have known battle, but we will not fall. That was the first piece. And then I'm going to read one last piece for you all. This piece is entitled Akwa, and it means helper. In Takrade, girls learn to unmake wrinkles from clothes before learning to spell their names. Their hands curb every crease, weave a song, find hymns in the cleansing they begin their days with. Today, their dresses stir in an agile sun, and water is in demand everywhere. The girls wash, a steady purification, a hum for the days when they become long. Helper is a kind word. Hushful is preferred. Today, the girls become long bodies braided in labor, a baptism in bend, because before there was preference, There was tradition. Often they pause, admire their bruised, wrinkled hands as if to say, the wash is better, always better than the fold. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to be reading two poems, and the first is called The Hope of Floating Has Carried Us So Far. It's titled after the book itself. Okay. Never mind the endless march of death or this season of breathless panic. Right now, I could be forgiven for thinking the world a crocus, blooming joyfully in each direction. I am listening to the rain make my tires of rooftops. Somewhere, someone I know must be dying, but not here. In another room, my mother and sister are playing a game of cards. Their laughter is at once ordinary and the relief, like a cool towel pressed to feverish skin. It's okay to be afraid if breathing feels too close to dying. It's okay to question the principle of survival, how so much has been cut short, yet so much endures. People keep saying the world will never be the same. I want to believe them, but I can't remember a time when the prospect of contact did not signify impending loss. Listen, I think this must be it. The rest that was promised us. Here, in the safety of our homes, we are free to imagine a future untainted by blood. At last, we can tend to our bodies, grow our own food, forgive each other our absences. And the second poem is titled, The Author has a Conversation with an Empty Room About Belonging. Where are you from? No one calls me by my real name. I could tell how dark it was outside by the way the vultures rose to pick clean the carrion of my parents' marriage. It almost looked like love, their feathers colliding into each other. It almost looked like love, shaking years of hunger and loneliness. Whose daughter am I if I only think of family when I see them? I have been told it is a blessing to have a home at all, no matter how many times the bed is stolen from under you. A room full of people whose tongues can summon your name without breaking it if it ever becomes too heavy to lift on your own. Blood being what it is, I forgive my father a little every time I open the 7 can of beer. 2. What do you want? This entire year is a stillborn choking on its own amniotic fluid. Every day I am told to count my blessings. Every day I am riddled with debt. I'm sorry I'm only able to love the world the way it is in movies. Better dialogues, better resolutions, the best and worst parts of ourselves rendered in neon lights and punctuated with songs. Every scene smeared with the apocalyptic promise of endings, whether deserving or not. I need to know there is a limit to how much hurt we can give or earn in one lifetime. Maybe it takes an hour, maybe 2, but always a suddening into quiet. I need to know where that silence leads. 3. What are you ashamed of? I laughed every time my lover, male and drunk on his maleness, said I love Dick too much to be anything but straight. I sometimes forget to take my own shopping bags to the market. I gorge myself full of meat, which is to say, there is still so much to give up. I fear I have started too late. At Sunday school, I put all my money in the collection basket after I let a girl cleave the word God from my tongue again and again until it becomes a prayer pleading its way into heaven. The ocean will stay an ocean even after it eats the land, and all we have left is a colony of debris to plant our flags in. I trust my name the most when it arrives at my ears, hungry and shaken loose from a slippery mouth. All I know about loss is how to carry it. 4. Tell me what you think love is. It is that time of the year before the hours grow teeth, and I wake over and over to greet the same hands, the same woman who it seems I have always known and loved, but do not remember how either came to be. It is how easily she laces her fingers through mine, despite the swirl of shadows sharpening the air around us. I think it was the night I climbed out of my hotel room window to test my breathing against the wind. How I felt at home with the birds, the imperious tangle of electric wires, the tiny sky spread across my skin like an open palm. No one in my family was present the day my grandfather died or the day he was buried. I fear I have been willed a permanent absence, to die alone and far away from the people who will know what to do with my body when I leave it. Thank you.
Bonsoir, mon famille Maurice. Merci, mon famille Chagosienne. Thank you, all of you, for coming. Their homecoming is not yet out of reach, not yet out of sight. Faut pas qu'on est ici pour rester arrivé, faut pas qu'on est ici pour rester trouver la case maman. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child, a long way from home, a long way from home. The archipelago is not where one man lived, but it's where they all remember living. Remembering is like that. Memory, a sliding door between adjoining rooms, old and young Chagos hearts cohabiting. What are the last things you remember? The man appears wide-eyed, only 4 or 5 years old. Every time he slides out a memory, a child slips back and boards the boat. The man considers what the child knew then. The forced removal and the longing to return. The archipelago remembers him as a boy, and each generation is charged to remember the archipelago. The past is tidal in their minds, or shall I say in their souls, while the land waits to recover the older selves. Tonton, tantine, grand-père, grand-mère. A dying community separated by unseen things. Spirit from sea, hope from land, and yet united by wishful thinking, mouth by mouth, their communal truths told in one continuous breath. Dans son sommeil plus profond, Madame Lisette Talate retourne Chagos. In her deepest sleep, Madame Lisette Talate returns to Chagos, leaving the Mauritian slums where so many continue to follow her example, standing in protest against the lies and chaos orchestrated by the officials who claimed there were no indigenous people on Diego Garcia, Perros Bajos, none on the sibling islands of Salomon, Egmont. And so the islands were swept and sanitized. An albatross was spared and the order given, a few man Fridays must go. The slave ancestors who fished, loved, and prayed across the centuries, the generations who dried the copra, cocoa, extracting the oil from the kernel of the nut, even the boss of the copra plantation struggled to see over the rainbow. On the main island of Diego Garcia, the US base, Camp Justice, squats. The Chagosians are still chanting, Hanu Diego, Hanu Diego, Hanu Diego. 30, 40, 50 years later, fighting for the right to return. Their loss is unimaginable, these guardians of the Chagos archipelago.
This poem is titled The Horse and the Rider. And Miriam answered them, Sing ye to the Lord, for he hath triumphed gloriously. The horse and the rider hath he thrown into the sea. Exodus 15:21. In the beginning, the gallop as if the ride into a procession of victory songs. But the sea inside my body drowns both the horse and the rider inside me. It's such grief. My body, which was made for me, is also against me. I walk forward, but I always end where I began. Ejiobe. Like a door without a key, I must be torn down before the possibility of an exit or entrance. In search of deliverance, I commune with all the deities. Lift up your head, O ye gates, and be ye lifted up, ye everlasting doors. By the riverbank, I invoke all the spirits with an offering of kola nuts. Take these, all you who dwell in the sea and in the air and beneath the land. Take these and give me an exit from this realm of grief. Take these and give me an entrance into the realm of neon and rainbow. May the horse and its rider no longer be thrown into the sea. May the sea inside my body be quiet as the grave. Thank you. I'll read another poem, and it's titled Invocation of the Morning, or Orikiori. This day I wake into the arms of dawn, out from slumber's grave. I praise the heavens, my hands stretched out like gates. I praise the earth, my voice crawling up the ladder of a song. Sleep is the death that we die daily. Gratitude to all the forces that rise us again. Hear, O heaven, tremble, O earth, at my invocation. I bless my head with the blessing of a cowrie, white of the sea, a small thing sought by the diviners. Little as I am, let me be meaningful. Let men seek me as they seek the cowrie. Sea wind, sea tide, sea current, sail Omije far away from me. Sea wind, sea tide, sea current, float higher towards my life. Let all good things come to me. All good things, I say, come to me. Thank you.
What a fantastic set of readings, and we have more to listen to. One of the things that struck me to mention is just the stunning look of these books, these images that we are seeing in the slides that are showing there. And some of that great work is, of course, the art that we are showcasing, but it's the amazing work by Akashic Books with Johnny Temple and Aaron. This is a team at Akashic that have been putting together these box sets, and they're one of the most beautiful things to just hold in your hand, and to share with people and so on. So if you can, you should get a hold of it. Other people who are involved in this production, Ashley Stross-Snyder was very much involved in putting this issue together. She's part of the African Poetry Book Fund. She was for a number of years. And Paul Clark, who are part of the APBF, working out of the University of Nebraska. And then now Sira Mazanat has joined us, and she's also working with us in this fantastic project. So the last panel that we're going to check out are some of the poets that we published in the series. It's good to mention some of the actual chapbooks. So we'll be hearing from Ajibola Tolasi, whose chapbook is Kula Lobitos, and then we'll be hearing from Jeremy Teddy from Liberia, one of our first Liberian poets, whose book is Miriam Magdalit. A wonderful collection, and then we'll be hearing from Kutuf Yahia from the Sudan, from a collection called Can My Poets Don't Die? Can My Poets Don't Die? And of course this is a fantastic thing. I should mention Selina Nulu's collection, Keep the Bodies Buried, as well, and she's from Nigeria. So it would be great to just hear the rest of these poets and to hear them share with us in the next few minutes. So let's go.
Hi, I'm Ajibola Tolasi. I would read the poem Obalende, Lagos. The story of this land is told by tourists, mariners who batter their shirts for gin, natives of the wharf who labor on decks. This is Lagos Highland, patch of dirt spewed by the Atlantic. Smoked fish is fed to men loading oil barrels into ships that took slaves decades ago. History returns here without its chains as white men disembarking onto the piers with skin tanned by the African sun. I came to the highland in my youth to find my space among the jostling bodies of commuters. At the intersection of Campos and Broad Street, where the sweat of my father is lost in the mineral of the soil, I walk into the high-rise building. A foreign correspondent is interviewing residents for her $100. I answer her questions about my family size and gross income. Yes, we pay tax. She can tell I am not poor. She declares me ineligible for a project. Outside, I dig into the ground with my bare hands. I find half of a broken collar. The bones of the neck is held along broken. My father, in the highland of his youth, found a chain at his job where he tightened bolts and greased gears. Although what hung from the chain was an automobile engine, he returned home knowing he could never go back. The second poem is titled Buffer Zone. I am here because my family has been evicted. And if every 7-year-old is homeless, there will be a Charles Taylor army of boys. This morning, a neighbor got me drunk on gin. It says he's building a man inside me. My mother is mad my father won't beat me. She won't eat a man either. It's the wet season of '99 and our men are with Elkamel, fighting in Liberia and Sierra Leone. I'm happy my father is alive. There's an eviction notice in his pocket. I'm at the landlord's door because my mother says someone needs to talk to him man to man. I make my hands into guns and fire at his door. I hang with other boys. We play in the other empty roads. We make impressions of the head of state. We pretend to shoot guns. They say we are the voice of the street, but I want to say I am hungry and mean it. Maybe we are quiet in the dark because we hear our bowls filling with rainwater dripping from the roof gutters. Or we are quiet because we think silence precedes miracles. If Jesus lives here, it's enough if he makes our bowls into lakes. My father is a fisherman. Watching him slap fish dead with his baton, I know he is no different from the man at war. Insomniac, haunted by the open eyes of dead fishes. Thank you.
Uh, Hello, I'm Jeremy Kellycom from Liberia, and I'll be reading 2 poems from Machado, Miriam Magdalene. The first poem is entitled The Gospel of Jesus' Wife, which was written after Morgan Parker. After my mother saw her dream for my father, she learned that there are some prayers that will never reach heaven. And there was some night after the war that disrobed us of our bodies. My father essentially to attract him without him teaching my mother how to turn water to wine. I grew up with this coming out of course internal light, the world nurturing me as it were. At night, my mother fell asleep with an empty plate. She waited enough for manna. The first man that showed my mother how to hit men was not my father, but the man that filled her stomach with dragonfly. Often at night, my mother cried under her breath, beneath her blood-stained body. That is how she prepared a table before us. The second poem that I'll be reading is entitled Salome, Mary, and Miriam Magdalene. How can you read about them? Women shot there in the head beneath their husband bodies, hung to replace the flesh. The war that ate our mother in 1990 came back and finished us off in 2003. How can you tell my sister this thing about the memory stuck in her throat like a fish bone? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Qutub Yahya. Thank you for joining us today. It's an honor to be heard by all of you. I'm going to be reading from my chapbook, My Poets Don't Die. My poets don't die when I am armed to the teeth, unknowing and still prepared to fight a war they have plotted and prayed for futures ago. Martyrs and prophets alike don't die. They give until mornings come. They mourn until some things give. They preach with their bodies on the line that it is not what is in the ground, but what the ground remembers to leave us. Maryam, daughter of the country, mother of men held hostage and sometimes crucified. She did not arrive as a song, but as a poem. Born in Kober prison, born in 1973, born to Mahjoub Sharif, Maryam was a plea for waiting out the darkness. She cradled stories of fight and cellmates who did not give, not at the first break of blood, or at the smell of copper. Maryam was fuel, was vessel and ember. Her children survived only by the fire. Maryam was a simple woman with simple dreams. She only ever wanted freedom. But the longest distance between mother and child is a paid soldier. And Noura, daughter of the dry years, born to the people, kin of my kin, did not arrive as a woman but as a prophecy. Noura was made not of thick skin but thicker burdens, gave but not from abundance, took only to make more. She cradled stories from the mouth of the margin. Noura was loved by men whose only service was in departure, faraway men who knew her dreams but could not make them. Noura had visions of fire, but Noura was promised the rain. Noura was promised return. Noura was promised the rescue. Noura had asked to learn chalk and board and compass, plow and herd and grain. She only ever wanted freedom and only ever reaped the pain. And I, daughter of the revolution, born to my mothers before me, sister to the saved children, did not arrive by chance. I arrived armed and with intent, cradling a gangrened womb, 5 young girls swallowed by the Nile, and Noura. I arrived afraid, but I do not walk in fear, I walk from it. I curse the uniform that calls me a whore, and curse the walls too high, and curse the beds too low, and curse the air that makes me cry, and curse the locks that turn on me. I leave behind my father's back to curse him too. I do not wait for men to write me a poem, but I will hold their hands when they bleed. I will sing their songs and fight the war, but I will fight it long after they have claimed the win. Thank you.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. It's pure fire. What can you say to this?
Look, we stumble around, Chris, you and I, trying to put things together and so on, but when you hear this work, it's just something.
It really is, it reminds me, when this was all conceived on one of our Poetry Africa trips, and it was in South Africa, and I remember we're at this amazing hall, and people like Harold Petziger, he still was alive, and all these amazing poets from all over the continent. And it's sort of, as every poet read, there were all these young people in the audience who were all poets themselves, and who were often always watching and never on stage, was still standing up and shouting, fire, call down fire. And so that's the thing that I take away from this evening, is the generosity of these younger poets. And I don't mean that in terms of age or in any diminishing way. I mean that in terms of like fresh voices, startling voices, innovative voices. It's been really a remarkable thing to see. And I will never forget the first time we had poets read from the chapbooks, which was at AWP. And it was a small room. They gave us one of the smallest rooms because they didn't think anybody would come. And we had all 400 people, standing room only, and 6 African women read poems. And it was a stampede. It's like the whole conference was shut down.
That was Latham and Warsan and DJ Jema and and look at this new crew. This has been quite stunning, and we are grateful. I think I can speak for Chris that we are thankful for the life you bring to us with your poetry, each and every one of you, and you're doing something really important and beautiful. I can't say it enough. It's hard to do it here because you can't see, and I know people are just being moved and being taken by just your words. So stay in there, in your little room, wherever you are, and write those poems, man. And we'll be here to support it and to make sure it gets out there. We'll do everything we can. I'll tell you that. That's the commitment we make to you.
And just to thank again Johnny Temple, who not only supports what we do, but supports and has supported from almost day one of Akashic Books, Writers of Color, in a remarkable, long before people thought it was fashionable to do so. So I just want to give a shout out to Johnny and the whole crew. And it's sort of the crew at Akashic are like a family. And that's how I think of us at APBF, a family of poets. And we're grateful. Thank you for everyone who tuned in. Thank you to the poets.
And the Schomburg, boy, you gave us a stage. Thank you. Yes, cousins of mine were writing and saying, "What are you doing at the Schomburg?" I thought, it's the Schomburg, man. It's the Schomburg. We are truly grateful.
We have arrived.
Yes, Charlie. Hey. Thank you all so much.
you.